Hello, Roll Mithril here once again, getting back to Mag Mammal 2, and it's time for the judge commentary on the last two stages we just played, starting with 14th place, Lung's Truffle Man. Snow and Pyro, pretty neat level. The custom enemies are actually super neat and adorable, and they're used and combined in interesting ways. I really like the enemy that shoots the wave of explosions. It's used in some pretty neat rooms, and it's interesting to work around. I'm not sure if I like how the noble nickels were hidden though. 2 out of 3 are behind breakable walls that took me a couple of playthroughs to even realize they were there. Both the mini-boss and boss were impressive and a lot of fun to fight, and the level's just fun in general. I don't like the final stretch before the boss though, with a moving mushroom platform. It's a huge pain to try to kill the mushroom mets while trying to stay caught up with the platform. I feel like better enemy choice would have made the section more fluid and fun. I still really like most of the level though, it's just super fun and creative. Joopy Hornet. This level really felt like something out of a fan game. The custom enemies were great, and the bouncing mushroom gimmick was executed very well. The small bouncing mushrooms were placed in ways that were fun without being too hard for the level. The big ones went fast enough to keep you on your toes, but slow enough that you could catch up to them if you fell behind. The mini-boss was also fun to fight. It was spammy but fair because it didn't have much invincibility time, if any. My main issue is that the stage was a little bit too short. I wanted to play more. Truffle Man himself looks really cool, and the fight is fun, but that laser attack takes up a bit too much space. Overall though, fantastic level. Angel. Pretty nice level. I like the mushroom-themed enemies and how they behave, though I'm kinda sad the level forgot about 2 of its enemies after the first room. Aside from that, it's pretty consistent and has a nice flow to it. I like the mid-boss, but I have some problems with Truffle Man himself. Aside from his buster dealing a lot of damage and often chasing me down after I thought I had already dodged it, since every bullet homes individually rather than it being a streak of 3 in the same direction, he limits off the arena, often causing the player to be right next to him, which is not where you want to be when a robot mushroom is tossing peas at you. I think he could have been more interesting if he utilized the pollen bombs from some of the enemies in the level instead of cutting off parts of the arena. The level itself is mostly fine, though I'm not a fan of the last section before the boss. The truffle mets on those platforms have to be taken out quickly, or else the player will miss their ride. Placing a non-shielded enemy on the ride would have made getting back on the platform more reliable to accomplish. Overall, this stage doesn't do much, but it has a nice theme and is fun to play. Gariri. It's a pretty good level. The stage layout is actually very solid, however there are some issues, such as with certain enemies being too difficult to avoid, or noble nickels that are too hard to find. I like the mushroom enemies too. Other than that, there's not much else that's considerably interesting in this stage, but it's still one I enjoy. And Aespark. So here comes this level feeling like it's straight out of one of the official games, more or less. Good stuff. The negatives to the stage? I think the color palette is a bit drab and boring. The spring mushrooms and enemy mushrooms should have at least been different colors to help lessen confusion between what is an enemy and a gimmick, and I felt like it was very bizarre that the mid-boss has a greater range of attacks than the Robot Master. The weirdest bit of the stage? The single solitary Katonbion from Mega Man 6 that shows up, randomly, and isn't used again. Bear in mind this is all minor, very nitpicky stuff. I guess the only real issue here is it is not one of the most creative stages out there. This stage gets enemy and gimmick conveyance spot on, the theming is completely consistent and well joined, strange dragonflies aside, and finally, it makes full use of every gimmick to its full effect. I have a slight issue with the Master. The fact that lasers are suddenly introduced to the stage is a bit off-putting, but this is yet again a nitpick. He seems pretty difficult, but also pretty fair once you get used to him. As far as good Mega Man levels go, this counts, and in my opinion ticks every box. Great work. This was actually a really nice solid stage. I enjoyed this one. But yeah, I do agree that it is kind of weird that there was just that one dragonfly enemy and it never showed up again. The little bouncing mushrooms only showed up in one room and never again. And that the Robot Master suddenly used lasers. That was a bit odd, but it was overall a fun fight and I really liked this stage. So next up we had 13th place, Kunosachiaka's Mount Sabre. Snow and Pyro. Oh hey, more references I don't get. Very interesting level, though I'm not sure if I like the first half all that much. I don't really think it introduces the new enemies and its concepts very well, and the usage of the melting ice blocks is okay at best, and there's a couple of awkward jumps that annoy me. Also, the zombies don't actually run into you, they stop right in front of you. Wait, really? Once the level gets to the second half, though, it gets a lot more interesting, with some actually pretty difficult setups involving those Soundwave enemies. It actually plays really well, and I like it a lot. The level also has a lot of charm going for it too, with funny dialogue through it, and it just seeming really clashy in an adorable way, seeing Mega Man just running around in what seems to just be your typical NES RPG that didn't actually leave Japan. So while the first half is pretty weak, the rest of the level is strong enough that I can still call it a pretty great level. Joopy Hornet. This is so cool. I have no idea what game this level is based off of, but I really like it nonetheless. My main issue was with the cave section. The green Dratini looking things and the spiders were spammed way too much. The bats were annoying and it seemed like my shots went through them. Yeah, I kinda noticed that one too. Also, the boss was pretty boring, and it felt like more could have been done with it. Still, the level is pretty fun overall, and has a nice aesthetic, making it an enjoyable experience. Angel. What a charming stage. It feels like an adventure, and somehow the top-down plus side-scroller mix works beautifully. It's a bit long, but really well designed, and doesn't suffer from its aesthetic either. I think if it was stripped from all of its custom graphics, it'd still hold up as a fun and interesting stage. I think the enemies here have a bit too much HP, and some jumps and sections can be rather tricky to overcome, especially when relying on the buster, but this stage is great regardless. Gariri. I kinda feel bad not knowing what franchise this level makes reference to. Even that aside, I really liked the ideas used and how they were used. The only part I didn't like was right before the boss gate, where it took me a long while to figure out that you can actually climb the blue wall like a ladder. Other than that, the level design is fairly solid, although I didn't like the very precise ice block section, and a few other places with enemies requiring precision or timing to avoid. Other than that, there's not much else I can say about this one, except that I really liked it. And Ace Spark. I have no idea what the stage is a reference to. Okay, 5 out of 5, 6 out of 6 if you count me. No one really got that. But it is a neat idea for a level, and that is really all this is, a clever idea that is not expanded upon to any great depths. You nail the look of the stage though. It's seriously unique. Mega Man traversing an overhead landscape? Cool. Nothing in the level actually taking advantage of this unique opportunity? Boo! At the very least, nothing feels like it's pointless or added for no reason, so the level is at least coherent. Still, by purely platforming standards, it's fun enough. Your new enemy assets are solid, even if a few of them had perhaps a little too much health. The zombie comes to mind. I wish I had seen more platforming gimmicks of some description, especially if you weren't going to take advantage of the level situation with the enemies. There's only one unique non-enemy gimmick in the stage, towards the end of the level. I really wish it was more than a mere cutscene in practice, though. Other neat features were the opportunities to talk to the NPCs. I kinda wish there were more of them, honestly, as the writing isn't half bad. The boss was alright. I'm rather surprised I never saw him use that sword of his, which he showed off in the intro. It's Ganondorf from the Smash series. Maybe just another attack would have benefited him from being ultimately really forgettable. I'm glad he showed up all the same. Great idea and wonderful attention to detail, too. Alas, the execution is utterly average. Could have done with a bit more of a push to utilize the advantage the concept had. So yeah, this stage, I admittedly kind of disagree with the comment about the aesthetic not hurting it. Specifically, one point of the aesthetic did kind of give me problems, and that was what I talked about in the stage itself, the curved edges that some of the platforms had, making it really hard with how precise a lot of the jumps were, to where you really needed to utilize as much room as you could possibly have. With most Mega Man platforms, it's a very square edge, so you get more of an idea of just how far you can tiptoe out. Not so when you're kind of walking on nothing. And as wide as a lot of the jumps were in the last part, that was kind of a thing. There were some jumps I just did not feel comfortable doing without utilities as such. Overall though, the stage was still pretty nice. It was an interesting aesthetic overall. I haven't really seen that done a lot, like this kind of top-down view in a side-scroller game. So it was kind of interesting to see. But yeah, I really wonder what game this was based on. I'm sure in the first video people have said. But anyway, that's where we're going to call it for now, so thank you very much for watching. I hope you're enjoying the series so far, and I shall see you again next time. Until then, fare thee well.